No, officially. All right, so we are back up and running here, and we covered a lot of the pitchers from top to bottom, those that you should be running, those that you should be staying away. And you were in mid-thought sentence something with the Philadelphia Phillies, but that's fine because now this is also going to factor in to the stacks when we start looking from top to bottom, value stacks. And I think maybe I was in the middle of letting everybody know about everything we're doing here on Awesemo Plus and the free tools that you have as well today, especially where you can take advantage of the MLB main slate ownership projections. But really today is the last day for Awesemo Plus Platinum, 25% off. So all you Awesemo Plus members, those of you who are brand new to it, or those of you who have been using these tools for ages now, winning money each and every night or week, however it may be, today is the last day, 25% off Awesemo Plus Platinum. Use our promo code Gold Rush. Big word, all caps, Gold Rush. Today is the last day. All right, let's look at this here and move back to the bats. As you know, we exhausted the pitchers, and we'll start looking at stacks as well. And if you just look at Alex's top stack tool for tonight, it's not anything. Again, we have 4 games, so it would be nice if one team maybe just separated itself from the rest of the crew. And this would be an easy one where it's like, all right, hey, Alex has already done the work. Let's look at it. But you've got a couple of teams from the Braves, Red Sox, Jays, and Dodgers at double digit for top stack percentage. So Gundacker, let's start. Who are you eyeing for you personally as your top stack tonight?
I'm right. Braves in the ballpark and Dunedin, Red Sox, Blue Jays. Those are the 3 that I want the most of. I kind of thought they would come in a little bit higher owned collectively, like to have each of those 3 stacks under 20%. Even 17 is egregious, but on a 4-game slate, I thought that maybe I would have to pay a little bit higher tax. Right now, I'm sitting at about 22% each for those 3, and then sprinkle in the leverages and the other side, maybe some Dodgers. But yeah, it's Atlanta, Boston, Toronto is the apples of my eye tonight.
Terry, any apples of your eye? Maybe just one?
Yeah, I can echo that. I'm pretty enthusiastic about the Red Sox here. I think that's a great spot. Playing in what I described today is a parking lot behind a supermarket featuring a 200-foot home run distance down the line and right in a brick wall acting as the automatic catcher. That's basically my take on this field. And in addition to that, they're facing Steven Matz, who's a lefty. He's given up power over the course of his career, only inducing 9.6% swinging strikes in 42 innings this year, 44th percentile of hard hit rate, though he is in the 73rd percentile average exit velo allowed. Just a tough spot. He uses his changeup primarily to keep righties honest, and the Red Sox have a ton of righty power hitters, and he's yielding an expected slugging percentage of .517, which is not good on that pitch. So I think they're in prime position to put a hurt on Steven Matz and chase him early here, get into that pen, and do some damage.
Is there anything, and I'm just curious how your guys' minds work, and I know that's a dangerous question for both of you individually. Trust me, I've worked with you long enough now to know that going off track, but I love it. Trust me. Is there anything, and it's so obvious, and maybe it's just for people that are still newer to baseball and MLB DFS, but outside of the ballpark, and I would look at this from a betting standpoint as well, but outside of the ballpark, and just being Dunedin and just being that bandbox, is there any element of this game that you would fade from a stack standpoint? Terry?
For me, let's see. I'm just taking a look at the 2 confirmed lineups. I did drop the Jays in here. Not really. I don't love the last 3 in the Jays lineup, but on a slate of this size, I'm all about mixing things up. I'm very willing to get to the bottom of lineups on most slates anyway. I think there's, some secret upside there that people don't get to enough. The Red Sox side of things, I'll be down there for sure. Hunter Renfroe, Bobby Dahlbeck, Michael Chavis. I like that a lot if people aren't going there, even more so. On the Blue Jays side of things, it's a lot tougher to justify Santiago Espinal, Danny Jansen, and Jonathan Davis just from the 3 hitters that they are. You can get a little bit of sneaky catcher upside on DK if you want to roster Danny Jansen. People like to just throw the catcher in with their 5-man stack, whoever it is. Danny Jansen, not much of a hitter, does have 3 home runs this year, but a 118 ISO in his 93 plate appearances. So if I was talking about it in terms of a game at Dunedin that I do like both sides of in the offense, I would maybe cut the Blue Jay stack around 6, but then you're dealing with all the high-owned hitters. So it's a little give and take in that answer.
Got it. And I imagine that's something similar to where if you were going to stay away from one side, Gundacker, would be obviously with Toronto. I don't know if there is anything with Boston that maybe could be saved for one-offs if, in fact, you were going to avoid the stack.
No, like you said, if you're going to gamble on bottom of the lineup, high strikeout guys, you want to have access to power. So Bobby Dalbec against righties so far, slugging over 600, Renfroe over 500, Vasquez even at 500. Like, these are guys that have power, whereas on the bottom of the Blue Jays, we're talking a bunch of 400s and below sluggings. So if you're going to strike out a lot, and then when you do hit the ball, it's like a single here and there, it really doesn't add much value to what I'm trying to get out of a fantasy score.
Sox 123, I see it. Money line. Road dog right there. Based on what you guys are saying and just playing this out, I would think that might be one of the best plays of the night on the board, especially for value. And hey, I'll say it too. The Marlins has a road dog as well. I don't hate at plus 114. So just looking down now the list as far as trying to find some more value with stacks, knowing, of course, that we have Atlanta and, well, actually, I guess beyond Boston and Toronto, is there anything with Atlanta that, because I see, they're the one team of the three that's in the negative for the leverage. I don't know how much that would be a deterrent if you're looking at stacking Boston versus Toronto as well. Ownership stake is going to be significantly higher, at least right now, for Atlanta. So I don't know if anything would factor in for Atlanta starting there, knowing that you have Boston, Toronto in that field, if anything would maybe knock Atlanta down a peg when you're ranking your top stacks.
Just the ownership for me. Yeah. For me, it would just be about the ownership. Looking at some of the ownership numbers in the last update I dropped, we've got on the DK side of things, the top two hitters in that Braves offense approaching 40% ownership. The next four hitters in the mid-20s. Now, you're talking about a 4-game slate, so you do have to eat some chalk somewhere. But these are aggressive numbers. They're pretty similar on DK, on FanDuel, where they're approaching 50% for the top two and in the mid-30s for the next couple guys. So I love this Braves lineup. I get to them a ton of the time. It's just really difficult to put them together in unique ways, particularly given the pricing as well alongside the ownership and the positioning. I would try and work in some, Ozzy Albies is a little bit lower owned no, he's not. Sorry. Austin Riley and Dansby Swanson are the names there in the middle. They're in the mid-teens on FanDuel, low 20s on DK. I would try and include those guys alongside a selection of the higher owned hitters. It's just difficult to put them together in a worthwhile, unique way.
How much can you factor in, Gundacker? We know that the Dodgers with Price, a bullpen game tonight expected. Arizona is Arizona. They've been getting pounded or at least beat up by the Dodgers. They're going for their 4th straight tonight against Arizona. So clearly the imbalance is clear, but they're going to be at the bottom of the projected stack. They're going to be super low owned as well. Can we take advantage at all of the circumstance tonight with the bullpen start for the Dodgers?
Yeah, you're talking about playing some D-backs here and there. Yeah. I actually do have quite a bit of Pavin Smith, and then Ketel Marte is a really good baseball player, easily their best player. He just got injured to start a little bit into the season. So the pushback on Marte is he's 5.4K. So he's not a value bet or anything like that. He's just trying to leverage some of the higher owned guys that maybe don't draw that type of ownership. And I'm sprinkling 1 or 2 D-backs for value really across most of my early lineups that I'm seeing. I have a whole lot of Pavin Smith, so hopefully he does actually start. That is the last of the Mohicans when it comes to lineups that we're sitting on. And then when that comes out, I can make some definitive decisions here. And I think we may not have that lineup by a main slate lock. So, but yeah, I'm gonna cherry pick some D-backs here. I do think David Price is enough for me to pick on, and then I don't think the Dodgers bullpen is inherently bad by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, chip at a chair some of these guys for a double here, maybe a stolen base. They can be aggressive on the base pass, but it's not anything that we can really plan for or prepare for other than betting on talent. So Ketel Marte, Eduardo Escobar, 2 good switch hitters that can always have the platoon advantage. I'll take some shots on them. But again, understand it's not really a value shot. It's more of just a low ownership one-off to maybe late night hammer some of these lineups because it's hard to justify 5-4 on Ketel Marte when the Braves are staring you in the face.
All right, fair enough. Now, I'm curious on your list of exposure that you have tonight with lineups and projected lineups, Terry, are you going to look at anything with the D-backs as a possible value stack as well? Or maybe there's another stack at the bottom that jumps out that you think has even better value of a return?
So I'm running Crunch right now, and we're just about to crest the 150 lineup mark in the Crunch. And just to put it in perspective, as far as like what's in here, people ask what you include in your player pool a lot. The top owned team right now is stack wise is the Red Sox at 32%. The bottom owned team is the Miami Marlins at 13% of the stack. Every single team is owned. So I have pieces of everything right now. That will come out in the wash as I go into the sorting and filtering process. I'll have less of the bottom end teams, but I'm very likely to have a piece of every single thing I can get my hands on this slate. I want to capture a broad range of outcomes here. Looks like we just got the last lineup, so we'll find out what's in that Arizona lineup in a sec. But I do like the idea of getting to some Diamondbacks here. They're low owned. We do know that, at worst price is going to start this game. And the Diamondbacks have pounded left-handed pitching so far this year. So there's that upside for them. Like I said, I don't think he's necessarily come down and crashed and burned it nearly as hard as people seem to remember from the last 2 years in Boston, then didn't pitch last year. Out of the pen this year, 10 2/3 innings, 24.5% strikeout rate, 2.98 xFIP, an ugly 1.69 whip. And that's always been his issue, is putting too many guys on base. So he does that here, gives up a few runners. Somebody goes deep. This game gets broken pretty quickly. So yeah, you can definitely get to some Diamondbacks bats here, particularly at very low ownership. And I'll go you one better. There actually are a value stack on FanDuel. Marte, the highest priced player at 3,600. I'm happy to pay that for him over here. Doesn't really compare like that 54 across sites. And their average salary for the starting lineup is 2,600. So easy to get to them.
Last on the stacks, and then we'll hit some as far as go around the diamond, get you the best looks at individual players. We'll go position by position as we get through. And again, we're back up. So another reminder, hit that like button. We want to make sure that we continue is subscribe, like everything, share across the world, grow already the largest DFS platform on YouTube. So we need to continue to get you out there liking, sharing, subscribing so you don't miss anything, including when we go out, you still have access to everything on Awesemo Plus Platinum. Today, of course, brought to you by Jock Market, continuing to tell you about this fantastic opportunity to jump in and treat fantasy sports like a stock exchange. And it's awesome. As soon as it becomes live, again, we're waiting here in PA for it to become live, but you can jump in everything across the board, still with NBA playoffs, still with MLB, golf right now, MMA across the board. You could jump in over a ton of opportunities to make money, real money, throughout games and matches and events, where it's basically like the stock market. You can buy and sell. You can jump in with our code as well. Use our promo code AWESEMO50 for this week only, and you can get a promo code and match up to $50. Again, that's AWESEMO50. So let's look at, as we can, guys, kind of looking at positions, handling stacks as much as we can from top to bottom. If we just look around and starting with catchers tonight, and Gundacker, you can look at it knowing that pricing is a little bit less of an importance, I imagine, because of this shorter stack. So for one-offs with the catcher position, maybe it is somebody at the top, and knowing that you're paying on DraftKings, if it's Will Smith or Vasquez, or maybe you're trying to go a little bit deeper to try and pay a little less, spending money on a different position.
So one of the guys that kind of sticks out for me for a little bit of power is the catcher for the Pirates, Jacob Stallings. He's batting cleanup, and he actually is the highest rating in my bomb detector. And it's an interesting leverage play against Drew Smyly, because he'll assume a lot of ownership. And I actually have some lineups that have Smyly with Stallings. But when you just remove Smyly from the equation, Stallings is a cleanup opportunity here, plus park hitters wise, batting over 300 against lefties in his sample size, and slugging 560 with just a 20% K rate. So Stallings right now, my favorite catcher, even though I'm not committed to a Pirate stack.
Are you gonna roll with Stallings too? You got another catcher for us, Terry? You gonna go Napper, Andrew Knapp tonight, 2,300 on DraftKings? Come on.
I tell you what, I don't have a great way to sort by position here, but I'll go with Christian Vasquez from the Boston Red Sox, my favorite stack of the night. I think he's got some power upside. I think he's going to be under-owned for being Christian Vasquez on the DK slate where you have to have a catcher. So if I got to pick a positionally like that, I'm happy to go with Christian Vasquez. So I would lock him into catcher. Important note on the Diamondback stack, which I think is a little thing that we should talk about real quick. We get Josh Reddick in the middle of that lineup. As far as I can tell, he is not on either site. So you have a hole in the middle of that stack hitting fifth. So that kind of, I don't know, it puts a little bit of a hole in the middle of that batting order. I still like getting to it. I don't think it's tragic by any means. You can still roster the top four. You can certainly skip a spot and go down to the David Peralta spot there, but just worth noting.
All right, so real quick on that, just to follow up with both of you guys and Terry first, and we can talk about this as well, Gundacker. When you see something like this where there was going to be some, even if it's minimal on the short stack as well, short slate, exposure to the D-backs from a stack standpoint, how much does that change now, Terry, to where maybe you're looking at one or two one-offs? You know, Pavin Smith was a name that Gundacker was pounding as far as exposure that he has. Does having that hole at 5 really start pushing you to looking at still keeping exposure for a couple of these bats, but no longer forcing a stack?
Yeah, it's more I want to be aware of, how my lineups are coming together in terms of having that gap in between hitters. Now, if we're leaving 2 gaps in between hitters, well, we could go, 2, 3, 4, and then get down to something like 8 in our fantasy cruncher. And you get to, some poorly correlated lineups pretty quickly if you're not at least paying attention to the fact that gap exists. It's not something that's going to force me out of looking at the way that at least, the top 6 or 7 here come together, though. I think there's enough there where it's still basically the same conversation in terms of their upside, particularly between Pavin Smith, Ketel Marte, and Eduardo Escobar there.
All right, similar situation, I guess, for you, Gundacker, if you kind of just look at it in the same way.
Yeah, we actually kind of deal with this with Ohtani once a week, where like you can't play his bat, and
it's a great example.
That's a huge part of the Angel stack. Overall, the 5 spot in a stack is a pretty valuable one because it does bridge a lot of correlation between the top half and bottom half. But I mean, it's 4 games slate. If we don't get to play Josh Reddick, we don't get to play Josh Reddick. It is what it is.
Super chat, Doran P. I imagine that one's for you, Gun, right?
Is it a year? If it is,
yes, it is.
A year? Yeah, I didn't catch
Super
that.
Chats, premium Slack, whatever you have for us, we'll answer. Even if it's just a shout to Gundacker, we'll do that. Right down to Peter Weller movies, if you want to go down that list like Terry and I did last time. All right, let's look at first baseman. Now maybe you start spending for guys if it's in the one-off scenario. We've got Vlad right there at the top, Freddie Freeman, Hoskins a little bit less there. So, Gundacker, let's start with you here with the first baseman as far as really best value for kind of that Venn diagram, right, where cost and return meets.
So, I mean, yeah, outside of Freddie Freeman, the obvious guy, assuming a lot of ownership, I do think if you're looking for some value with a little bit of pop, I think it's Bobby Dalbec, 2,500 on FanDuel, 3K on DraftKings. You're not going to be in love with where he's batting, but he does present a lot of pop, and he is getting a plus park. And from a bottom of the order guy, he's on the road, so you don't really have to worry about getting robbed of that valuable last at bat that seems to be overvalued by the DFS community. But darn, we don't get to face the closer. Yeah, so Bobby Dalbec would probably be the next man up for me in that first base position, past the obvious Freddie Freeman, a couple other floaters, maybe a Muncy.
We get another thing that we need to call out here that the news guy just dropped. This could just be a matter of this pitcher going in to take a leak real quick before the game starts, but Vince Velasquez just walked in from the field, went down the dugout steps with no report as to why, per Jim Salisbury, via the news god. So that could be bad.
Figure that one out here.
Before the slate starts. 15. So
yeah,
that could be bad news. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Already on your 5th starter here, so it's not like you could just move down the list to Wheeler or Eflin. This is not going to be good here at all.
I don't know that you want to do that with your pitcher.
Short rest anyway, right?
Notice anyway, right?
Yeah, exactly right. All right, so let's just
speaking of short rest, that's something to note on Price as well. He did throw an inning 2 days ago, so another reason to not believe that David Price will pitch very long today.
So real quick, if in fact Velasquez gets scratched, and I'm trying to figure that out myself here, and I think you might be right more so than not, Terry, where maybe he was just rushing in last second, right, to get anything else out of him, literally before the game. But if that happens, and I love Baldy and the Vince saving us from himself. Yes, I'm telling you, that moment is coming. I've seen it far too often with Velasquez. But if this is the case and you run to a rush start, whoever the Phillies go to at that point, how much more? Let's just go back to that Marlins stack. How much more are you going to look at exposing your lineups to the Marlins?
Yeah, I might. Go ahead, Gunn. Take it.
No, I was gonna say. I mean, Velasquez was somebody I was gonna pick on anyway. I would also say just like that's a 15-minute decision. So you guys out there, a lot of people walked away from the computers once that D-backs lineup came out, and they're locked and loaded. So this is
Vince Velasquez scratch.
Oh okay, goodness. So get on your global swap machines. Unfortunately, it'll most likely be a bullpen game if I had to project it from where I'm sitting. But we'll wait for that information. But that's massive. I mean, that's NBA style of
NBA style. This is Joel Embiid style. Gun. This is I see this in the same city with Embiid.
I mean, like this happens every day, multiple times for NBA. So those of you guys that are here from NBA, you know the drill. But
the NBA slate lost 4 people since Vince Velasquez scratched.
Yes, fair enough.
So, unfortunately, that makes the slate really, really ugly. I think it's a good FanDuel slate. I'll say that. I think just 50-50, Smiley, Alcantara, and maybe some begrudging exposures to, one of the Dunedin pitchers. But, get rid of Velasquez ASAP. And if you are a subscriber of an optimizer, this is where you get a little bit of an edge there. Because if he was going to sit at 60% owned, 20-minute notice, I could definitely see, I wouldn't be stunned if he's 15+% still, right, Terry?
Yeah, he's going to definitely carry some ownership into this slate. There's not enough time for the public at large to be hopping off him. They've gotten better at it in general, and the sites have gotten better with allowing it. But we're short on time for people to make the right decision there.
That's why you have to
no rake.
No.
Yep.
And that's why you have to like. That's why you have to subscribe. That's why you have to hit the notification bell. I mean, my goodness, let's say you did walk away. Let's say for whatever reason you justified walking away for even a couple of seconds here on the show. You would have known right away, or you were late to the show. You would have known right away what's going on. More news?
It looks like David Hale is going to open this game for them. Yeah. Give you some quick information on David Hale. He has a 4.16 ERA, 4.12 xFIP, an under 10% swing and strike rate, sitting at 7.2%. So he's a contact pitcher, ground ball guy, 50% ground ball rate. Does give up some power to righties, a 2 home run per 9 to righties. So maybe a sneaky shot at Jesus Aguilar batting second now. His matchup just got a lot better. But against lefties so far this season, really the last couple of years, hasn't struggled against lefties. And again, a bullpen guy, he's probably out there for 1, maybe 2 innings. And then if I'm looking at the bullpen for the Phillies, I have all this in my spreadsheet.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, really go with like Alvarado maybe for a couple?
Yeah, Jose Alvarado, big lefty. I think he used to play for the Rays. He threw 22 bullets 2 days on Tuesday. Matt Moore might be a starter, kind of a middle reliever that eats a lot of innings. He has started for them in the past. So he'd probably be my guess. If I had to, Archie Bradley could probably come out there. They're going to glue together, but it does look like their bullpen's not overly taxed from the last couple of days. Just their last game, Ranger Suarez, 11 pitches, Brandon Kinsler, 15, Coonrod, 12, and Brogdon 11. So technically all those guys could be available today. No one's been extremely taxed. David Hale threw 54 pitches on Sunday. So it's been 4 or 5 days. So maybe we do give him 50 pitches. So he might see 3 innings, David Hale. So one time through the order.
Yeah, that could make. And then Moore makes sense. Favored. I had missed Moore was out there, but yeah, he's a converted starter, so he could get a couple innings in there.
I can't. I mean, this right here, and again, depending on how this shifts, we talked earlier about just the Marlins being that road dog, and still, if you can get in, see odds shopper hasn't changed it either across. So this is so late from both DFS and betting that it still hasn't shifted or impacted it right away. It's definitely something to look at moving forward. All right. So as we continue to kind of get news coming in, if it's with Reddick or now with Velasquez, and that's gigantic. Is there any other first baseman? Freddie Freeman, clearly the obvious one. Is anybody, either one of you, Terry, are you going to pay for Guerrero, or do you have more exposure for Guerrero than Freeman?
Let's see what's coming up in this current crunch that I'm running. It looks like I'll have more Freeman, but it's
Okay.
pretty close. We're talking about like in this crunch, like low 20s% Freddie and high teens percent Vlad Jr. So it's they're coming up fairly evenly, those two stacks, two of my more popular stacks in this crunch. Boston coming up, Atlanta coming up 31% of the time, Toronto coming up like 29% of the time in this current crunch. So
nobody's going to run with Pujols tonight in the starting lineup.
I knew he was going to land with a
cheap.
contender. I just didn't. I got the coast wrong when I said it was potentially going to be the Yankees.
Oh, you just wanted to buy a Pujols Yankees jersey. Admit it.
The number?
Just be a number, man.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, let's look through this here. We're winding down before lock so we can burn through some positions. Let's just start here as we go to second base and continue kind of move around the diamond here. Let's just look at it, Gundacker, if there's a name right there at the top and maybe somebody that is lower on that list that you have a lot of exposure to for whatever reason that may be.
Are we talking about a specific position?
Second base, I'm sorry.
Second base? Okay.
Yeah.
I got Max Muncy, Eduardo Escobar, Ozzie Albies, and Marcus Semien as my top four. I think Michael Chavis sneaks in there as well, with Albies being probably the highest owned of the bunch because of the Braves association. But those are the 4 or 5 names sticking out for me.
All right, Terry.
I mean, if Gunn wants to take the top 4 second baseman, I'll take the bottom 4, and we'll go ahead.
There you go. There you go. All right, how about third baseman then?
I gotta leave some names. I gotta leave you some juice. Hold on.
No. Here's the thing.
No,
we'll just keep going. So now Terry can return the favor with third baseman.
Right,
how about that?
Yeah, we just got a ownership update that got Velasquez out of there, guys. So if you're looking for the ownership, should be up and running. So hit that up. And I'm just talking through, clicking over to my sheet here and trying to find all the third basemen. We've got this multi-position eligibility and all that fun stuff. So obviously, I love Rafael Devers on this slate, despite the lefty to start the game. I don't really worry about that. I like Austin Riley here too, in that Braves stack that we're getting to so much. He was my home run pick for the Braves in my team by team choices. I think there's some sneaky power upside for Austin Riley there. So that would be one I would get to.
All right, we'll keep moving here to shortstop position. Again, we got to get these likes up here. A couple of minutes left before we lock in. Reminder as well, today is the last day for 2 big things that we're doing. Not only the Awesemo Plus Platinum, 25% off. Today is the last day. Tomorrow is Friday is the last day for the NBA play-in special. And that gives you 2 weeks access for only $4.95 to all of our NBA Express weekly pass content. That's 2 weeks of the NBA Express for the price of 1 when you use our promo code PLAYIN at checkout. And we've got more on this gigantic NBA game coming up next with Live Before Lock. So we are not going to stop diving as deep as possible into this one game. You might as well jump in now and use our promo code PLAYIN. And also, as far as Awesemo Plus Platinum, that's Gold Rush. We keep telling you that because today is the last day, so jump in on it. All right, as far as shortstops is concerned, we'll swing the pendulum back now in Gundacker's favor here. Boston has been a topic of much discussion when it comes to stacking, especially going up against Toronto last game down there in Florida. So Bogarts, I imagine, is going to be right there at the top for a guy that you have exposure to.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that Terry just mentioned, the ownership projections just got updated. Steven Matz, a lot of people, what do I do now? A lot of people are going to Steven Matz, and he could see 40% ownership, which I wonder if just optimization rules lessens the ownership on the Red Sox. And if so, do you think that could be a mistake? Because Kike Hernandez, all those guys up there, and I'm right there with you on Bogarts, cleaning up a really, really strong lineup in a really, really plus spot. So yeah, Bogarts at the top of the list for me at the shortstop position. Also do like Dansby Swanson. We love some Braves today. Gavin Lux is up there for me. And then Bo Bichette. I think those are the obvious 4. I don't really see myself dabbling too much with the bottom guys, Newman, Nick Maton, Miguel Rojas. Although Rojas is extremely intriguing now as the leadoff guy against a surprise bullpen game.
All right, Terry, just winding down positions. We've got a couple of outfielders that may jump out. Acuna breaking that slump that he was in. Also have Bryce Harper a little bit below that. A couple of guys in between, including Betts out in L.A. Is it 1, 2 guys that jump out that you have the most exposure to?
Yeah, I mean we're definitely going to be getting to a good amount of those Red Sox bats, right? But my top
JD
three are
Martinez,
those.
yeah.
Yeah, the top three in the 20s, low 20s. So I've got in this crunch over 500 lineups. I've got 24% Acuna, 22% Harper, 22% Mookie Betts, 20% JD Martinez, and 19% Marcell Ozuna. So it's all the stacks that we're talking about, which is really how you want to go about baseball, guys. Below that, the next couple of guys are Enrique Hernandez, Alex Verdugo, who are both Red Sox. Then we get into a mix of there's a couple Dodgers in there, some Blue Jays, a couple Phillies start to creep in around the edges. We get those Diamondbacks we talked about, and everybody in that grouping is coming up in the low teens down into the single digits in ownership distribution across these crunch.
Gun, your last words on the outfielders, brother. Any thoughts on somebody we might have missed or even lower on that list? Bryce Harper?
Nah,
Bryce Harper?
Bryce Harper does line up metrically just fine with Alcantara, and I even have him in some of my Alcantara lines. But like I said, I think Ketel Marte could be a really fun play. 5-4. No one's really going to get there because of the other names in the 5K plus, and a good little opportunity batting second. Like I said, David Price doesn't scare me, and I do think Marte's a strong enough bat to get on, maybe hit a double, maybe steal some bases every now and then, show some pop. So my favorite leverage play, I guess, or low owned play as a one-off is Ketel Marte in the outfield. Other than that, it's basic. Outfield strong, and this is really where the meat of a lot of your favorite stacks are going to be today.
Yeah, and all the news that came in last 20, 25 minutes, you guys have been all over that, and show your appreciation for Gundacker. Terry, hit us up, like, share, subscribe, the notification bell. For Jordan as well, another fantastic show. We appreciate you all out there in the Awesemo community making this the most watched, the most viewed, the most interactive fantasy content on YouTube across the entire world, and that says something. But thank you to you all out there, fellas. Appreciate both of you, and I guess your Yankees will be in the World Series before you know it, right?
There you go. October can't get here soon enough.
Yeah. We'll see basketball, different story. Thanks, fellas. Good luck, everybody.
Good show, boys. I'll be Delbeck, the home run call, if anybody can hear me still out there.
Oh yeah, sorry, we got to.
Jacob Stallings.
Love it.
What is up, guys? It is Elimination Day here in the Eastern Conference. We're going to find out who our final 8 teams in the playoffs are. And we got ourselves a showdown slate to talk through it as well. Playoff pigtails are fully in effect to help turn around my bad juju from the first 2 days of playing games. But I am Chris Spags, joined by a man who also is hatless. And that's really the important thing here. We are the only hatless show on this stream today. But he's nerd-ass Greg Ehrenberg. How you doing, Greg?
A little bit of a panic. Actually, kind of thankful that producer Jordan was struggling a little bit to get the stream up and running at the very top there. He was panicking. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but there was a little bit of technical issues. But for me, I'd update all of my baseball lineups because Vince Velasquez, the chalk pitcher of the slate, apparently got hurt warming up and was not able to play. So everything, for some reason, all the DFS sports are blending together. It's like, hey, NBA regular season is over. There's not enough injury news, but don't worry, baseball pick up for it.
Well, the good news, Greg, is that because of your preparation in the NBA streets, you were ready to handle that bit of business in the MLB. And just like all of you guys out there can get advantage by playing all the DFS sports that are around right now, because we have everything going: the NBA, the MLB, the PGA, MMA, NASCAR. It is all going off. NHL playoffs. That's why you need to use that promo code Gold Rush today while it still lasts. I know that it's something out there for you guys, maybe a big commitment for you, but if you are able to use the same DFS principles we talk about on this show, in the MLB shows, especially really all the using of tools and data that we have at your fingertips at awesemo.com/join. You're going to be able to find your ways at a lot of DFS sports out there and make some profits for yourself. So make sure to go to awesemo.com/join. Use that promo code Gold Rush to get 25% off your first month of all the Awesemo Plus data. That's player projections, ownership projections, a lineup builder for each sport, top stacks tool, top pitchers tool, top fighters tool, top golfers tool. There is a top something tool for every sport out there. It's going to help you make better lineups. So go to awesemo.com/join and use that promo code Gold Rush before it goes away at the end of today. And we got one more promo code for you guys, the much vaunted Play-In promo code that you can use at awesemo.com/join, where you get 2 weeks of the NBA Express package for the price of one. So that's just $4.95, and you get all the showdown data for yourself, which is going to be crucial for these slates, ones like today, ones like tomorrow. There's going to be a lot more before the playoffs as well. And some of our guys you've seen, Rinpack has made a killing in the showdowns over the years. DeColt, Steve Buzzard does a great job. Tom, Alex, really all of our guys who've been putting this data together for you guys as well as using it have been doing really well with showdowns, and that is your chance to get in on it. Let's go to awesemo.com/join, use that promo code Play-In, and you can see some of the stuff that we are talking about on this stream today. And speaking of, Greg, we are talking about this showdown slate for itself, and I gotta say, this is a showdown slate that it really seems like there's not a lot of deviations you can make. But I'm just going to give you a hot take question from the jump, Greg. Is there one thing you're doing with your lineups right now that you think will be drastically different from the rest of the field?
So I'm going to answer this in one way. The reason I couldn't really figure out how to differentiate too much is the reason why I had built lineups for the FanDuel single game slate, and I was looking to upload them. I was like, there's no way this doesn't split with 1 million people. With the way that the FanDuel pricing sets up, I found it very difficult. So I have lineups built on FanDuel. I'm certainly ready to answer anybody's questions on it, but personally, I find it pretty unlikely that isn't going to be a massive tie for first. That is, unless there's something just way off the board that happens that I don't foresee happening at all, like Russell Westbrook getting hurt or something like that. I mean, short of that, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of dupes on FanDuel. For DraftKings, I think the easiest way to differentiate is just play somebody goofy at captain and hope that Bradley Beal, Domantas Sabonis, Russell Westbrook, all of them go off, and you just have yourself a kind of a different lineup construction. Obviously, I still have a lot of exposure to Westbrook and Sabonis at captain, but I threw in some goofy lineups where I have like Daniel Gafford at captain and hope like Alex Len gets into early foul trouble, just for the purpose of making something that's different that has a chance to win. That I don't think is likely to win, but I think at least is something different than what everybody else is going to play.
So let's talk about the showdown captains. And as I think Josh is talking about in the deeper dive, and obviously Adam and Lofty as well, talking in that 3-man group that did a great show earlier today. For some reason, you can't stand Greg and me. You can go back and listen to that one too, though. Shame on you for that. That's we're here for you guys too. But I would say one thing he pointed out on FanDuel, just pointing out the lineup construction part of things and how it really doesn't make sense to go too different at the spot like an MVP, or even, just getting Westbrook in every lineup. And that is going to be the case on FanDuel, where Westbrook is projected for 100% ownership on the FanDuel tournaments. On DraftKings too, I think he probably should be pretty close to 100% owned. This is something that we used to debate a lot, Greg, on the late slate sweat and swap show when we had some of those showdown things. I would say for me, playing Westbrook somewhere besides captain, playing that utility today on DraftKings, that is one thing you can do to get away from 30% of the field. That's also our ownership projection. Wouldn't shock me based upon this run of games that Westbrook has had, and the fact that he's also, in particular, people love the DVP, BVP, all those stats that we try to talk you guys out of looking at too much. But people look at these games versus Indiana that he's had, they'll see that he's almost been at 100 fantasy points at some of them, and they're just going to plunk him in at captain. And I think, to me, that's not going to be the construction that wins. And if it does win, it's going to be with so many people that it's probably not worth playing him captain, to me, more than 10%.
So I have more than 10% of Russell Westbrook at captain. Also, for the record, I played 20 lineups in the DraftKings Showdown. So not 150, not 1 or 2 lineups, but I put in 20, and I have Westbrook right now in captain in half of them. But with that said, I'm still waiting for the Pacers news, right? We have Brogdon is questionable, and we have Edmund Sumner is questionable. As of right now, my projections assume that Brogdon is playing, but is playing somewhat restricted minutes. He came back from a hamstring injury last game, only played 21 minutes. And then Edmund Sumner, I currently have out, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, he played last game. He was questionable heading into the game with quad injury, and then he ended up. Oh, by the way, we just got news on that? All right, never mind. Brogdon playing, Sumner playing. All right, there we go. Just
so no question.
Screw everything I said.
Get there we go. Just early. Go on. Finish making your point, because I think your point was still going to tie in well enough.
I mean, it doesn't matter now, because I was going to say I didn't think Sumner was going to play, and now he's playing.
Oh, was that I didn't know that was. Yeah. I thought you were sort of setting up to go like, and anyway, I think they're going to play, and then all right, never mind. So yeah, these guys were playing. I assumed they were playing based on what the quotes were from Nate Bjorkgren earlier in the day. But yeah, they are playing in there, and I feel like Sumner, we talked about him the other day as a value option that I think could have gotten there if he just didn't get hurt. He had a weird 37.5% usage rate and whatever low single digits allotment of minutes he had. So was getting some shots up and getting success, but ended up leaving that one with the same injury that he went in with. I think Sumner's a perfectly fine value play to get to today, and I think we could sort of segue over there too. But I guess give me your quick thoughts of Sumner and Brogdon, since we did just get the official news that they'll be going.
All right, so Brogdon is really difficult for me to peg the minutes down, although I don't find him all that appealing of an option anyway, just where he's priced. So he is currently as if the price is going to change. He's 10,000 in the utility spot on DraftKings. So he's only at a $200 discount from Bradley Beal. He's only $1,200 less than Domantas Sabonis. And given the long layoff that we've seen from Brogdon, I understand it's an elimination game, but I mean, last game was an elimination game. It was a blowout, so they didn't have to push him, but he only played 21 minutes, and it was the first time he had played since April 29th. I still have Brogdon playing a significant amount of minutes, but I didn't give him a full run, and I don't think I'm going to change it unless we hear otherwise. So to me, Brogdon also, even if he was to get a full run of minutes, I still have him projected well behind guys like Bradley Beal and Domantas Sabonis anyway. So I currently don't have Malcolm Brogdon in my player pool. Is that something you would like to talk me to change my mind about?
I would. So I think the thing with his minutes last time out was he had 1 6.5-minute stint to open the game in both. So that was still a little bit more than the 5 to 6 minute burst they talked about. Then he had an 8.5-minute stint to close out the half for the first half. And I think would have been in probably around the similar timing for this game. But the assumption for me would be that after one game of playing and he played over 20 minutes in that one, and that didn't include getting that fourth quarter run because the game was out of hand, I think he was on target for that one to play around 28 minutes. So today, I think you have to give him 30. And that, to me, makes him an interesting tournament option. I agree with a median projection. I don't think he's that great of a play, but I do think the field's going to be on him 16%. I think there's room for him to get there as a captain and also get there in a utility spot. So that's one of my takes I could dig in on a little bit more.
Apparently your dog either agrees or disagrees. I couldn't tell whether
she will not show. Well, let me mute myself for a second. Wait, hold on. Right now, I'm not going to.
I like how he's calling for his dog as if you didn't have to be muted to call for your dog.
Well, I don't. What if I called her the C word or something? Like, I don't.
Wait, is that something you regularly do? By the way, is your dog a Shih Tzu and you're just gonna have the same exact hair as it when it comes on stream?
No, she is a hound pit mix. People on watching the tip off yesterday got to see my yellow Labrador, Callie, who's a quiet little baby who never is very annoying. Whereas Penny right now, because my girlfriend's out of town and her brother's law school graduation, any sound in the hallway must be my girlfriend. So great dog guiding and guarding as always.
Yeah, well, I would have found it really nice if it was just a Shih Tzu and you guys had the same exact hair. Because I had a friend who used to have his Shih Tzu's hair kind of pinned back, and it did look exactly like your hair today.
I mean, look, they're a beautiful animal. I think nobody can argue that, much like Malcolm Brogdon is as a DFS play to transition it back. I would say for me, just to kind of close the loop on Brogdon, I think you have to put him into some exposure because if you think about guys who can, get you I think you need 40 fantasy points from somebody who's unexpected, or you maybe a little bit less than that if they're a bit cheaper. Like Brogdon can give you 40 if he gets 30 to 33 minutes. I think that's not really a question I would have. And the fact that the median projection looks bad, I think actually gives him some utility because I think he plays 30 minutes today as long as the game's competitive.
So I went, it's kind of a similar thought process, somebody in the same ownership range that I prefer to Brogdon, and that's TJ McConnell. Yes, okay. So McConnell, if I'm going to assume that Brogdon plays a couple less minutes. So, and by the way, that's fine. If you like Brogdon, I kind of like McConnell for the same reasons. I don't think that Brogdon is going to get quite a full allotment of minutes. TJ McConnell's been a really good fantasy producer as of late. So to me, maybe if I had played more lineups, then I'd probably go Brogdon and McConnell kind of in a similar vein where I play each of them like 20% or something like that. But for me right now, I'm on TJ McConnell, although maybe I'll have to dial his minutes back a little bit now that Edmund Sumner is in. So maybe that'll change it a little bit. But as of right now, I prefer McConnell to Brogdon.
I do get going to McConnell a bit more than the field too. So I don't disagree with you with it. I do think both guys though, like just because of the matchup, especially for McConnell, like the fact there are going to be probably some smaller guys out there, I think makes it easier for McConnell to get more minutes. Whereas Brogdon, I think, was just on pace to play a little bit more minutes people will realize. So I think that's sort of the case to be made. McConnell though, I think does sort of have some interest to me as a captain spot. And I think especially in lineups where you're not playing Brogdon, and if you are a person like Greg, who's going to not play any Brogdon at all or play a substantially lower amount of Brogdon, I think going to McConnell at captain makes some sense because there's a pathway for him to really just be a beast off that second unit and then kind of play a lot of minutes. I think he was trending towards closing last game as well, if that one stayed close. And can easily unseat one of Doug McDermott or O'Shea Brissett in that closing lineup. So I would agree. I think McConnell, to me, under-owned as a captain play and also very under-owned as a utility play.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, I don't even know if he's necessarily under-owned. I think it could be the appropriate ownership. It's just that, right, we're looking at this slate, and I think that if you're just playing the ideal optimal plays, even if it ends up being the optimal play, you're going to split with so many people that it doesn't that you're not going to profit anyway, or at least not profit significantly. If you want to have a chance to actually take down first place by yourself, then you kind of have to go out on a limb and play, something goofy like McConnell or Brogdon, the captain spot, or just go somebody cheap at captain and have one of these guys in the lineup.
So here's a question I have for you, because I think this sort of informs the overall conversation with how you're looking at your lineups and how I'm looking at mine. I was getting a little bit too many lineups without Westbrook in the utility spot. So I did make a rule that I have to play both Westbrook and Sabonis as either captain or in a utility spot. And the result for me ends up with a little bit less McConnell now than I would like, a little bit less in the way of Bradley Beal as well, though I think I'm going to have still 45% of him chopped up between captain and utility. But how are you handling Sabonis and Westbrook? Because I think if you do basically lock him in, whether it be at captain or at a utility spot, you're going to be forced into a construction that it's going to be hard to get to really, I think, anybody above 7K, it looks like.
Yeah, I have both of them in the majority of my lineups. I have them projected for so many more fantasy points than everybody else. I view Westbrook as the stronger option than Sabonis, but I think both of them I have in like 19 of my 20 lineups. So it looks like 19 of 20 for Westbrook and 18 of 20 for Sabonis. I still view them as very likely to be optimal, and I just tried to differentiate elsewhere where I could.
That's reasonable. We got a super chat here from Opposite XO. And if you have any super chats, drop them in. Obviously, we're going to have a little more time to talk about it, and I'll jump to them as soon as I can. We also still do money time. I forgot to grab a money hat from the closet to throw over my ghastly visage of the pigtails, but we will be doing some money time here at the halfway point of the show and give you guys the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel single game format. So hit that like button if you can. I know it's a second stream of the day here, but help us out. Hit that like button, get those likes up. But so texting, can't wait to see what I have in store for money time. To be clear, I don't have a hidden dollar sign somewhere here where if I could get my hair into like a dollar sign note, that would be so sick. I'd do that on every show and that'd be my gimmick. Let's talk though about the centers, because this is the question that we got from Opposite XO. Which center are you most confident in from the Wizards would be the question. And I will say for me, my confidence level is to the point that I will have 30% of each of them as a max and not a single percent more. And I think that's what I'm going to get equally between them, Greg. I just don't have a lean. I think you could see an Alex Len good day. Maybe he steals a few minutes, but also the last time this happened against Indiana, I think it is a little bit, tough to see the box score and you see Alex Len playing 20 minutes. That came with Daniel Gafford getting in foul trouble the last time these two teams played. And you did still see run going to Robin Lopez. I just don't have a strong feel for the big men where I think you have to get exposure to all of them. I don't mind getting them the same lineups, but I think to me, it's really going to be the most dice roll of any parts on the slate.
Yeah, confidence isn't the right word, right? Because I don't have confidence in any of them technically. And I rostered all three of them at different amounts. I actually have the most exposure to Robin Lopez right now for no reason other than he's cheaper than the other three guys. And I think that's a reasonable enough reason to roster him more than, say, Alex Len or Daniel Gafford. The other thing, too, and by the way, I do have exposure to all three of them, but something else I kind of like about Robin Lopez is I have all three of these guys. Daniel Gafford projected a little bit better than Len and Lopez, but Len and Lopez I have close, and it's not like I have Gafford miles ahead of Len and Lopez. I have him with a few more minutes, and there's a whole lot of variance in minutes here. So if you want to differentiate, I think one thing that does actually make sense is build a lineup where you leave $2,000 on the table and play Robin Lopez or Alex Len over Daniel Gafford. It's not hard to envision a scenario where Gafford is not the guy who plays the majority of the center minutes.
I think that is very reasonable. And I think that's something in showdowns that you can do more. It's sort of tough for me on the optimizer level to do that. And I know, doing a little bit of research, just going through some of the previous NBA showdowns, it did seem for the most part, winning lineups tended to be within a $500 range of the top part. But I would agree if there's a construction where Gafford lines up really cleanly, that dropping down to the centers as a direct pivot. And I guess like you could say the same thing too for like a lineup with, I'm trying to think where this would work, but like a lineup with Aaron Holiday, I think that works really well, dropping down to Edmund Sumner. I guess, Greg, are there any other ones that you're seeing like that? Because I think that is a good strategy, but I would be more inclined to do it where you have like sort of a direct pivot that leverages off the other one.
Let me think. Any other ones? I mean, I want to look at the updated ownership and see what we have for Sumner now that we know that he's in, because Sumner, to me, I mean, this is a guy who in Classic, right, where we had way more options, he was a chalk play 2 days ago. A lot of the field was getting to him, and for good reason. And then he just wasn't able to play significant minutes. He played 7 minutes and got hurt again. I have very limited confidence that Embiid Sumner is going to be able to play big minutes, but he is active. And let's see, when 11 minutes ago this was updated. Is that before or after we got the Sumner news?
I think that must have been it, because the one that I had before is 38 minutes ago, so nothing else has changed since then.
Okay, so right now we have Sumner projected for 5% ownership.
Yeah,
he's a really good GPP play if he's gonna come in at 5% ownership. My confidence in his minutes are nothing. If he plays 0 minutes, I'm not surprised. If he plays 20 minutes, that's a reasonable range of outcome also. So I think anywhere from like 0 to 20 minutes is in play for Edmund Sumner. It's hard to find value on this slate. So if the field isn't going to be there, even with news that he's in, I think that he's somebody to take a chance on in tournaments. I'd like to be over that 5% number.
Also, a news god apparently pointing out a longitudinal comparison to Jim Carrey from In Living Color in the chat, I guess. And he's made that one before, and I got to say it's not a bad one. Look, I'm not going to pretend this is a great look, but sometimes when you got to change your juju around, sometimes a man has to put on pigtails in order to figure out why things have been going south in the playing game so far. And that's any man can tell you that this is one of those songs that they've had in country songs. It's the dawn of time. Just one of those things that a man becomes a man when he learns that he has to put on pigtails to stop losing and hemorrhaging money every day in DFS.
listen, anything we've had, I just show up and talk because I'm not as committed to Spags, who's changing his hair, Eric, who's shaving his eyebrows and doing whatever else he does. But listen, I get it. Anything to break up a streak. We've had baseball players who don't change their underwear and whatnot, and this is your version of it.
I look, sometimes, especially when you have an hour show, you just bring in a little bit extra to fill that hour time talking about one game. But honestly, yeah, once I figure out how to do more with my hair, now that it's long enough, boy, you're going to be getting trolled with my hair time and time again. Let's talk about one other play that I think is interesting. And I feel like the price point pivots. If anybody has any questions about anything you're seeing in terms of the price point pivots, feel free to throw it into either the premium Slack or the YouTube chat. We're going to see most everything today, as long as the chat doesn't start flying by. A guy that I think, though, is going to be under-owned today, and the ownership projections right now have him at under 20%, and I think he's viable at captain as well as in a regular roster spot. And this actually might be one I have to dig my heels in a little bit. Rui Hachimura, I think, is one of those goofy captains that you were talking about, who's not going to have a ton of ownership, that can get you to 40 or so fantasy points, that can have a good day. And also has an added bonus where the box scores from last game are going to look bad. And it's something that Ben talked about at good length today on the tip-off show, which you guys should be watching as well, a little bit of more of a lighter-hearted show. So if you enjoy some of these bits that Greg and I do on here, you'll enjoy the tip-off even more. But I think we need to talk about the fact that Rui Hachimura last game just was in foul trouble the entire game, basically stepped on the court, kept picking up a foul, stepped on the court again, picked up another foul. I expect him to play like 30 minutes today with a chance to get into the mid to high 30s. And I think he's in a spot that could just kind of accumulate enough rebounds, enough peripherals, enough points along the way that he could be viable as captain, in addition to just being useful at utility. The price tag's not great though, Greg. So how are you handling Rui?
Okay, so Rui, here's the issue I have with him. Since the start of April, he has scored over 30 fantasy points once, and that was a game that Bradley Beal was out, if I'm not mistaken. So with that, actually, let me see that he might have played. Let me double check that. Beal actually might have played. Beal did play that game, but it was a game that actually, it was funny enough. It was a game against the Pacers where there was a gazillion points scored. So the final score of that game was 154 to 141. Hachimura did end up scoring 40 DraftKings points. But on the whole, the upside has just not been there for him. And it's twofold. Number one, just beyond him getting in foul trouble and that limiting his minutes last game, his playing time generally hasn't been super consistently high with Bradley Beal on the court. We've seen him get to, 30 minutes in some recent games. We've seen him in overtime games get over 30 minutes, but more often than not, he's kind of in like that 28 to 30 minute range. And his usage is fairly muted when Westbrook and Beal are both on the court. So I have concerns about what his actual upside is.
Yeah, I get that. And I just think, to me, the accumulation of minutes is the main thing, as well as the fact that he does, rebound fairly well. And I agree, this is one of the median projections. There are some plays that I think, for showdowns in particular in the playoffs, that you just sort of have to just kind of hold your nose and be willing to go a different way. And for me, Rui, I juiced this projection, which normally I won't do, but I did just because I wasn't getting enough of him and TJ McConnell both. And I think Rui, to me, is just the guy that I expect to project or to produce a little better than the projections will give him. And you gotta make that taste if you want. And Greg, I'll ask you, is there a Rui for you, a guy that you're sort of ignoring? I guess it might be TJ McConnell, but is there somebody that you're sort of ignoring the median outcome for and just trying to push about the field on?
Edmund Sumner now. Because like I said, I think the range of outcomes is so wide on him, and I'm just gonna keep refreshing this ownership until we get an updated one on Edmund Sumner. But if he's actually going to only be 5% owned, this is a guy who, like I said, we had a classic slate the other day where there was 4 teams in action, and Sumner was over 30% owned on that slate. So now all of a sudden we have a 1-game slate, and then just because, and by the way, justifiably so, people are concerned about his minutes last game after he dealt with a quad injury and was only able to play 7 minutes. But I think that there's a chance that he plays somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 minutes, and if that's the case, it's not hard to envision a scenario where he's one of the top value plays.
So we're going to do some of the ownership projections coming up in 3 minutes, but I'm going to throw out one more. And I feel like this is just now the time we could basically talk about every player on the slate. And actually, let me take the question, because this will fill time better. Charles asking best captain for single entry in a small field. So this is going to be a question a lot of people will have. And we've talked about some of my philosophies, but Greg, I'll just give you the floor first. If you're doing a single entry captain, who would it be?
So if it was single entry, and he said it's a small field, if it's small field, then it's Westbrook.
Yeah, I think for small field, for single entry in a larger field, I still think it's Beal would be the highest owned captain to go to, because people will go to Westbrook, or they'll go like, no, I'm going to be smarter than the field and go to Sabonis. And I think still that's going to constitute pretty much the entire field. So to me, Beal's sort of the captain, I think, who has the most upside. Like, I could talk myself into Rui, but Beal, I think, is the most obvious captain.
Yeah. I don't know that obvious would be the right word, but he serves as a pivot, right? Because if the majority of the ownership is going to Russell Westbrook, the chances Russell Westbrook fails, realistically, it's very, very low. The dude's been crushing for months now, but if he's in the winning lineup as captain, then whatever, then that's going to be a massive split for first anyway. But think one of the ways he fails is gets hurt, gets in foul trouble, or maybe just a lot of the usage goes to Bradley Beal. And to me, any situation where Westbrook fails, it's probably Bradley Beal's a really big game.
And I think, too, it's not even necessarily about him failing as much as it is him putting up 60 instead of 70 and Beal getting to 50 or 55 instead of 40 or 45. And that, to me, is the Beal captain argument. But we can talk more about that in a second. Let's do some ownership projections because it's money time. So here's my, look, it's a dollar sign in my head. Cool, we did it. Let me refresh it to make sure you got the most recent ownership here. But, of course, these ownership projections come straight from our Awesemo data team. You can always get in the mix and find a package for yourself at awesemo.com/join. Use that promo code Gold Rush. It goes away at the end of the day today. So go get in, use that promo code Gold Rush for 25% off the month of all of our Awesemo Plus data for every single sport. Top 5 on DraftKings. Russell Westbrook will be number 1 at 96% overall ownership. He'll also be the highest owned captain at 30% projected ownership. Number 2, Domantas Sabonis, 90% overall ownership. Number 3, Bradley Beal falls off a cliff to 45% overall ownership. Number 4, Justin Holiday, 37% ownership. And number 5 on DraftKings, Davis Bertans at 36%. So that's an interesting one, given the fact that he's not starting. On FanDuel, the top 5 owned plays, Russell Westbrook, mentioned this one, 100% expected ownership there. Domantas Sabonis, 87% on FanDuel is number 2. Number 3, Doug McDermott at 28%. So that's the fun of FanDuel. Number 4, O'Shea Brissett at 28% as well. And number 5, Davis Bertans at 26%. Greg, anything stand out to you? I feel like the Davis Bertans ownership definitely stands out in a way that surprises me here, where he could definitely get hot off the bench, but if they're carrying that vestigial ownership of him being presumed to be a starter, I feel like that's not the best play.
Yeah, so I know that Davis Bertans definitely kicked my ass the last time that the Wizards played. I had one pretty good lineup that had Bertans in it. I had Goga in that lineup the other day where Goga blew up, and I felt like, oh, this lineup's looking pretty good going into the late night, and then Bertans negative fantasy points at halftime of that game. So maybe there's a little bit of bias on my part, and I understand that there's definitely upside for him if he ends up getting hot, except the field is so heavy on him in a way that I don't really understand.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable way to look at it. And I'm surprised by the ownership too. I do think buying in on what I would have expected was the dip of him just shooting so poorly the last game, getting a ton of minutes. He was also aided in minutes in that game by Rui being in that foul trouble. So I think there's a lot of things here that are sort of adding up to be not great for Davis Bertans. Like I don't mind taking the stab in tournaments, but if he's going to be that highly owned, I just think coming in under that number of the 36% on DK just seems like a good move to at least be under a little bit. Let's talk about the guy who was a star last game too, Ish Smith. What came off the bench, played really well, sort of stole some minutes from Raul Neto. I think sort of benefited as well from the trickle down of Rui playing less minutes overall. But Ish was good. He's also kind of earned his way to more minutes recently, and it's surprising because he does do a lot of the things that Russell Westbrook does in terms of attacking the rim and setting up other guys, and it really does seem like he's found a role for himself, Greg. But the ownership not going to be too high on Ish. People not trying to pay that price tag. I guess same thing for Neto too. So are you going to Smith and Neto at any sort of decent volume? And are you willing to get to both guys together? Because again, these guys are just really very few plays on the slate, mostly unowned.
Yeah. So Ish Smith, I was so light on Ish last game, thinking that his minutes were going to dip with Raul Neto back. And I mean, they did go down, except he still crushed during the time he was on the court. So I actually boosted his minutes a little bit versus what I initially gave him. Even though I still think Neto should play a lot more minutes than him, I'm just not so sure because Ish Smith has played so good over the last couple of games that I feel like, especially if the Wizards get in a little bit of trouble, it seems like Ish Smith is kind of the guy that they're turning to off the bench to maybe try to turn things around. So, I mean, we do have Neto back today. Neto was back last game though also, and Ish Smith still played 26 and a half minutes. I don't think he gets quite that many, but he's somebody who's in my player pool at least.
Do you have a lean between Neto and Smith? Like, would you be willing to go back to Neto given the fact that he's starting and should theoretically get a better chance to fight Ish off in this game if he just plays a little better?
I still lean towards Ish Smith. If there was some crazy gap in the ownership between them, but it's not like Ish Smith is popular. I know that Neto is also coming in single digit ownership, and we only have Ish Smith at 15%. But given what we've seen recently, I think that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I think to me, trying to get a little bit above the field on both guys makes some degree of sense because to me, this also does fit with the hope that I would have that there's a pathway for TJ McConnell to get some more minutes. And I think Ish Smith and Neto playing more minutes sort of does have the trickle down that makes it easier for McConnell to end up closing this game and hopefully just seeing more run throughout. But that's it for me. I think there are other guys that we can continue to hit on. Keelan Martin was popping up in some of my lineups. Chandler Hutchinson was also popping up in some lineups. I really don't feel good about the latter. Keelan Martin as well. The minute's not the most secure. He's projected for 14.8 minutes today from Osmo, and even that might be generous, and we might need a blowout to get there, Greg. But Keelan Martin, Chandler Hutchinson, anybody, I guess, sub 2K, sub that Robin Lopez price point. Do any of them occur for you meaningfully?
Chandler Hutchinson, just because of his price point. I don't even have him project for that many fantasy points. I have him for 6 fantasy points, and that puts him in a bunch of my lineups just because of the way that the lineups are constructed for the slate, where I have Westbrook and Sabonis project for so many more fantasy points than everybody else in tonight's game that I just need to find the salary savings somewhere. And one of the ones that makes the most sense is Chandler Hutchinson. And it's not even that I think Hutchinson has some sort of massive upside or anything. It's just that him playing 8 minutes and scoring a couple of buckets could be enough to land him on the optimal if Westbrook and Sabonis both have big games, which, given what we've seen from those guys recently, it seems fairly likely.
So let's talk about some of the other chalky plays, I guess, in the mid-range. Justin Holiday is one that does seem like it'll occur to a lot of people. And I really did think, and I guess it's sort of going to be the construction of lineups on DraftKings today, but I thought McDermott would end up a little bit higher owned just because of him having the results last game. Then I can go, oh, he scored them all in the first quarter. Come underneath on McDermott and go to Justin Holiday. But because of the price point, Greg, you're going to see more Justin Holiday ownership. It looks like by a decent margin in the ownership projections, about 37% compared to 31% for McDermott on DraftKings. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me if it's a little higher just because Holiday does fit a lot better in some of the popular lineup constructions than McDermott does. Is there any utility to you in going above the field on Doug McDermott? And I guess you could say the same for O'Shea Brissett too, who is at a weird price point where he's more expensive than Rui Hachimura, more expensive than McDermott, as well as Justin Holiday. So any interest in these Indiana mid-tier guys who I guess could have an upside and maybe be in a construction with ownership that doesn't logically line up the way that it could?
Yeah, by the way, I don't know if it's my audio or your sound, but I'm struggling to hear you. So maybe okay. Jordan, can you give me a thumbs up? Is that just me or is that a Spags issue? All right, he has no clue. All right, but whatever it is. Anyway, all right, I just heard you laugh, so I feel like I could hear you now.
Hopefully.
Okay, cool. I could hear you now.
All right, cool. Yeah, the wire might have came loose on here.
All right, cool. Happening. Yeah, it's all right. I could figure out audio issues while we're doing the show also. But yeah, I was like, you started talking. I was like, what is going? I was like, the noise, the sound of my headphones is fine, but I could barely hear you. But
it's just, I'm a softer speaker when wearing the pigtails. I become a more delicate version of myself.
Just become a beta because you change your hairstyle. All right. So anyway, your question. So a lot of the guys we've talked about so far, we've talked about being overweight to them. And at a certain point, we can't be overweight to everybody. So this is kind of this price range to me isn't one I really like a lot. I think this is a slate that really sets up well for stars and scrubs. Doug McDermott, who was excellent in the playing game from an efficiency standpoint against the Charlotte Hornets, but he brings nothing to the table other than scoring. If he doesn't hit his threes, he's going to have a bad fantasy game. So he shot 7 of 9 from 3 last game. Cool. He finishes with 28 fantasy points because he made 77% of his shots from the field. Not something that's repeatable. And I think if he falls short of that number, even if he reaches that number at that price point, I don't know how likely he is to be optimal. So it's hard for me to see that much upside in Doug McDermott. So underweight to him, Brissett, underweight to him as well. Just the price point he's at, I would rather pay up to get to TJ McConnell, and McConnell's projected for less ownership right now. So this is a price range that's kind of no man's land for me.
I think it's a reasonable way to look at it. I think the thing to me that was more of how I wanted to approach it was that if Justin Holiday is going to be 36, Brissett's going to be 23, McDermott's going to be 30. I just wanted to try to flip those around and get a little bit less Justin Holiday or try to get it closer to splitting. And I think that's where I'm at right now in my final exposures from what I'm seeing. I'm hoping that holds, but I'm trying to get a little more Bradley Beal going. Either way, though, I think that treating these guys like they're the same play is going to be the move if you can get there. I think everybody's going to be able to get to Justin Holiday comfortably. So I really wouldn't hate the idea of just trying trying to get to Brissett and McDermott more, just as sort of the leverage play on Holiday. But still, it's going to be a play that these guys are all owned decently, and Holiday going to be the chalkiest of that trio. So if you're like Greg, you can move away from that group entirely, and hopefully be in some different constructions as well. We got a super chat here talking more about FanDuel. We got Soul Dope asking about favorite pro play on FanDuel besides the studs. FanDuel, I don't know if you're playing on there, Greg, but do you have any lean on what the pro play would be? Of course, where they have the MVP, the star, and the pro player.
Yeah, so just to reiterate something I said at the top is I built lineups for FanDuel for this slate and then ultimately didn't end up entering them because I was looking at what's optimal. And to me, I just think it's so likely that the lineups are going to be duped that I didn't really have a whole lot of desire to play there. But I did come prepared and I built lineups for just to see who I would like. Right now, the guy I have the most exposure to in the pro slot is Justin Holiday. I think that it's very likely that Russell Westbrook and Domantas Sabonis are in the MVP and the star spot. And then, to be honest, I think that you look at who's going to be optimal in the pro slot. It's so close for me between guys like Doug McDermott, Justin Holiday, Daniel Gafford, Hachimura, even Ish Smith, O'Shea Brissett. I had really flat ownership in the pro spot. And to me, it just kind of becomes a roll of the dice unless something crazy happens where Sabonis or Westbrook has a bad game. But yeah, so I mean, you could go with any of those guys. Justin Holiday by a slight margin for me, just because that opens up a little bit more salary savings in some of the utility spots by going to somebody like him. But yeah, in general, I think that it's really hard to find one guy that has significant upside in that price range.
Yeah, I'd agree. Justin Holiday, relative to the price points, like you're getting him a little bit cheaper, and then you're also getting McDermott and Brissett expected to be a little bit higher owned at both the star spot and the pro spot. So I think to me that does seem like Justin Holiday, just based on the tournament approach, would be the way you'd want to go there. But again, same theme though on FanDuel, that Brissett, McDermott, and Holiday are basically the same play, I think, with how they're going, just at different salary points. So I would try to keep that in mind and be as agnostic to those guys as possible. Let's keep going through, I guess, the rest of these guys. Any other super chats coming through? No. All right. Anything else, I guess, Greg, that you want to hit on? I know we can sort of stretch for time here, but in terms of priorities for you, in terms of how you're building lineups, whether it be the dummy ones you built on FanDuel or elsewhere, or obviously elsewhere being DraftKings, is there anything else that you are wanting to bring to the people just as a tip or an advice or a guidepost that maybe you encountered on your process?
Now I feel like I'm kind of stretched to give out some sort of tip of wisdom, but I feel like we've talked about every player individually so far. Let's go because we haven't really hit on this yet. If you had to go somebody totally off the board as a captain play, who is the guy that you would pick? I know you mentioned Hachimura before. Is that still your guy for the captain that's not going to be one of the stars?
I basically got a lot of everybody else besides Sabonis and Westbrook. Like I got 12% of Sabonis and Westbrook. But then I split it up everything else that I had amongst the other guys. So I got Justin Holiday at captain. I got McDermott at captain. I got Brissett at captain. All those guys equal because they are functionally to me the same play. I also got Robin Lopez at captain, which was not a deliberate choice, but just to get to the amount of lineups I was crunching, I just had to get somebody else on captain to hit the exposure numbers. And I think Robin Lopez sort of opens up a really appealing lineup construction, though I have no faith in it. I know it's something you've done a little bit more, been open to doing a little bit more in the past. We've talked about it, Greg, but like if you put Lopez at captain, you can get Justin Holiday, you can get to Rui, you can get to Beal, Sabonis, and Westbrook. I don't think that's going to be the approach that wins it, but I just feel like trying to make different lineups, like if you're not going to play Westbrook and Sabonis a lot at captain, and I do think that's not going to be the right approach to get different from the field. I think you just have to be willing to play whatever you can get, as long as you're getting to 2 or 3 of the studs in your actual lineup.
So to me, the answer is Daniel Gafford. I mean, we look at these cheap guys, and there's such a wide range of outcome in his minutes, but he's somebody we've seen as an excellent points per minute fantasy producer. When he gets extended minutes, we've seen him push upside every once in a while. So just based on that, to me, I think he's the cheap guy with the highest ceiling that enables me to pay up for all the studs while also giving me, some form of upside. We've seen him score as many as 31 fantasy points in the game where he only played 14 minutes with the Wizards. And obviously that's not the expectation. We've seen that a couple times from this year where it's like, hey, Daniel Gafford over 30 fantasy points in less than 20 minutes. So he's somebody who also, I think he's better than Alex Len and Robin Lopez. But if the Wizards really get into a pinch, maybe they get down early and they're like, oh my God, we panic and they have to throw somebody else in. Like think what the Spurs did yesterday, where they just tossed Gorgui Dieng, and ultimately they still closed with they still closed the game with Jakob Poeltl. But imagine if Dieng would have played really well in that situation. I think that there could be a situation like that for Gafford today, where they struggle early. They try to mix something up at center. Gafford comes in, plays really well, and they just ride him.
See, that's how I feel about Alex Len, though I don't think I actually ended up playing him at all, captain, because I think to him, the fact that he's still the starter, I think gives him the most obvious pathway. Like, I guess Robin Lopez too, because he's been kind of the closer at center. I didn't view Gafford as being one of those plays, but I agree. Like, it's it's a game where they have to win it. If Gafford's running hot, I don't know why you take him off the court, especially given the fact that, for future plans too, they clearly want to develop, and given that he's a younger guy. So I think there is a pathway for Gafford to get there. I just think he doesn't open up. Like, to me, it's more about Lopez or Len opening up the complete construction, and also Len being starter too. Like, I feel like that does sort of give you a runway of a few more minutes if you are playing really well. But I do think Gafford, if you're willing to take that risk, and if you're also like me and willing to play a lot less Westbrook and Sabonis, getting to Gafford to captain, like, the lineup's going to look good because you're able to get whatever you want.
Yeah. So, I mean, none of these guys I have too much confidence in, but that's my low end captain play, just because I think that he is the cheap play with the most upside.
Also, I think it's funny that if you watch the chat, it's just randomly people coming onto the link and then being confused by my hairstyle and making some remark about it and possibly leaving. But I'm going to read the good one saying, the Curse of the Blitz, one of our regulars, is also in the MLB shows a lot. YouTube, Deadass is the main pick of this live feed with Spag sporting the pigtails. I had to join the stream, or actually, no, she said YouTube was like that. So here I am. So that we're going to give me full credit for the viewership spikes today on the thumbnail, I guess, with the stream dying and all that. So Greg, if you want to grow some pigtails, feel free to join the community.
Hey, listen, I had a Jufro that was very commented on for an extended period of time. Then I got a haircut that was also very commented on. Now my hair's grown back a little bit. Like, what could I do with my hair right now? There's no way to make it pigtails.
And one day, Greg, if you really dedicate yourself to it and really open your mind all the way, you can get to the pigtails life. And I think it's funny though, like, it's a bunch of guys watching two guys doing a stream, and obviously I don't care at this point. All you guys having fun, I'm happy to do it. But like, it's funny that it's just like guys talking about how guys look on streams for guys.
Yeah, we do get a lot of comments about all of our appearances, which I do find to be amusing, at least.
Yeah, like I accept it. I understand when you don't put on pigtails like this, as I talked about earlier in the show, without knowing your merit as a man, and I know mine is very minimal at best. Let's talk about the premium Slack. Nothing good question-wise in the premium Slack, it looks like. So, but still worth pointing out that play-in promo code at awesemo.com/join, $4.95 for 2 weeks of all the NBA Express packages or package information that comes along with that, and that includes all the Showdown content possible. Today's a Showdown, tomorrow's a Showdown. There's going to be a lot of Showdowns for the playoffs, but in particular, some of these really big Showdown tournaments on days where there aren't multiple games. So make sure to get in and use that promo code play-in at awesemo.com/join, $4.95 for 2 weeks of all the NBA Express data. And you also get access to that premium Slack. So it's a helpful part of many people's DFS process and or being mad at people after their DFS process goes poorly. Let's see. All right. No good questions here. Though people want to see you in cornrows, I think you'd wear it well. I think I'd wear it well too, though I'd be deeply concerned about the reaction in public.
Yeah, that would be an interesting show if I give it another 6 weeks maybe, and then my hair would be long enough to where we could get my Jufro into cornrows.
Mason McLeah, I think this is in the YouTube chat, asking Neto or Smith. I presume this is somebody who missed our debate before, but as people are starting to get their lineups and you got 13 minutes left until lock, I presume this might be a question other people have who are just joining. So let's talk about it one more time. If you had to choose just one, Greg, between Ish Smith and Raul Neto, let's say him by his proper Brazilian pronunciation, which guy would you want more, Smith or Neto?
It is Ish Smith for me, given his recent performance. I think he's kind of carved out a fairly consistent role for himself with Washington going forward. Now in Sue, Raul Neto plays 30 minutes and Ish Smith plays 10.
Yeah, I think the low ownership on Neto, I would still consider going his way. I have Ish projected better, though he's projected to get more minutes too. So that does kind of come out in the wash. But Ish, my brain tells me Neto, my heart tells me Ish. I would go Neto though for tournaments. He's only going to be 7.7% owned on DK. That's like that. There are not a lot of guys who are going to be in the starting lineup in this game. There's really nobody in this game who's going to be in the starting line, but it's going to be a single digit owned besides Neto for DraftKings. So I guess keep that in mind. Let's see. Any other good questions? Would you set any rules for these Washington centers on DK like Max 1? No, I would actually not set any rules for that. And in fact, I didn't. But Greg, do you feel any differently here? Would you want to limit yourself to maybe one Washington center?
No, I think 2 is okay. I think if you're playing Gafford, Len, and Robin Lopez all in the same lineup, that's probably an issue. I I would definitely say no more than 2. But if you have 2 of them, I don't think that's too much of an issue, because let's say that Alex Len and Robin Lopez both go out and score 20 fantasy points, not a ridiculous outcome. And if some of the other cheaper options aren't particularly good in this game, that could be enough to land them both in the optimal lineup.
Yeah, I think that to me is the thing, especially with Lopez and Len. The price points are just like there really aren't a lot of cheap playable guys in that range. And I think that's sort of the cap too, where once you fall below Robin Lopez, there's nobody else who's really playable. Like Greg and I talked about earlier, you can play Chandler Hutchinson, but I don't have the most enthusiasm for it. I do think that's something that they mentioned on the deeper dive, which is kind of interesting, that if you add up the cumulative ownership of the centers from Washington, it does seem like they'll be in 99% of the lineups overall. And I think, or, if the ownership projections hold up, Greg, and I guess that'd be a question I have for you. Do you have any lineups without a single Washington center?
That's an interesting question, and let me sort them to check that. My gut feeling is no, but I could be wrong, because it's not like I have crazy ownership to all of them. Doesn't look like it. I think I have at least one of them in all my lineup. Not intentionally. That's just the way it worked out.
Yes, I cut them to 30% max for that reason, where I just wanted to be sure I could get 10% that didn't have one of them in there, because everybody's going to be playing one. And I do think if you really want to get cute with it, this is obviously just us kind of talking about filling time here down the stretch, but I think this is something for an approach for this particular slate. Playing none of them and playing Rui, I think, is a viable pathway where maybe they decide to go small. Maybe Sabonis is killing them. These guys aren't getting results, and they just need to play some more shooters in there. Maybe that does mean a Rui Bertans mix, but I think we could talk about some of the narratives you could spin, and maybe that's how we kind of close out the show, is talking about some of the potential storylines that could occur in the game. But just one where the Washington centers are all trash and they realize they don't need them, and they're just playing out of desperation. I think that's also one that probably includes Washington playing from behind in it. But that's one that I think we've seen actually in some of the playing games already, with teams sort of configuring around just to try to play guys that can sort of close the gap. I think there's a world where no centers go. So that's my narrative I'll throw in the mix, Greg, for people to tell a story with their lineups. Do you have any sort of narrative you can go to? If you want to just do the sort of obvious blowout ones, you can do that, but feel free to take this creative exercise however you please.
Yeah, so I think it's just trying to figure out those minutes for the bench guards for the Pacers. So to me, I think Edmund Sumner, we talked about him before, and let's do an ownership refresh, because at least the last I checked, there hadn't been one recently. But I was saying before, Edmund Sumner, now still Edmund Sumner, we've projected 5% ownership in the latest run. Sumner, he might be out of the rotation tonight. He only played 7 minutes yesterday, tried to come back from an injury, was active, but then got hurt really quick. Let's say that Sumner feels good, goes out and plays reasonably well, scores, 25 fantasy points, 20 fantasy points or something like that. That takes away from guys like Aaron Holiday, probably takes away from Malcolm Brogdon a little bit, maybe takes away from Doug McDermott, something like that. So I think Edmund Sumner, if you want to set a lineup where you're saying like, hey, I'm projecting Sumner to play 18 to 20 minutes today. And by the way, I think you can make multiple sets of lineups with different minutes projections. I think that's an interesting way to go about building showdown lineups. But if you want to go build a set of lineups where you're projecting Sumner to play a significant amount of minutes off the bench, I think that he very much warrants more than 5% ownership.
Is there anything different you're doing with randomness today, by the way? Like, I've been using 10% for the regular season, but was kind of tooling around to see if it gave me any different looks that I liked. But is there anything that you do with that? I just feel like as a general question, if you're not doing anything different, then no harm, no foul.
Yeah, I do. I don't really use a whole lot of randomness for NBA DFS, depending on the size of the slate. For a one-game slate, yes. One-game slate, I put 20% randomness on for Showdown, because it's a one-game slate. There's inherently a lot of variance and randomness that happens when it's a one NBA game.
Yeah, and I think too, just to get more different lineup constructions, I didn't end up using the 20% crunch that I was building, but I did feel like it looked pretty good. I ended up going to the one with 10%, but I agree. I think that a little more randomness for showdowns probably wouldn't be the worst move. And this is something I think maybe we could talk about on future shows and ask around some of our seasoned veterans, guys like Osmo and Steve Buzzard. Steve the Buzzard would be his puppet character, I think.
Yeah, if he was an Acme cartoon character.
Harrison Edmonds asking in the premium Slack, who's most likely to ruin your night? Let me see my exposures. It has to be dating. Are you dating somebody, Craig? That's good to hear.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to get too much into my personal life, but I mean, we could call it whatever we want. But actually, somebody we've talked about before.
Oh, okay. Interesting. So that's, I'm happy for Greg. Good to hear. Here's the thing we care about at Osmo, your DFS success and our fellow panelists and co-hosts finding love are really the two things we care about equally. So happy to hear it for Greg. Greg, who's she playing on this slate?
Nobody.
Oh, what a bitch. The person who's going to potentially ruin my night tonight, I think would be, I think it's got to be Bradley Beal, just because I did go heavier that way. And realistically, though, it's going to be if Westbrook at captain is the play, and then there's some configuration that works that's low owned and whatever. Because I just didn't go that way at all. I just feel like everything with Westbrook at captain will be completely covered as a base.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's Westbrook just because if he ends up winning as captain, sure, maybe my lineup goes like maybe I hit the nuts with a Westbrook. Actually, here's the real answer. Any lineup that wins with all of the salary left, with all the salary used.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Actually, I wonder how many of my lineups. I presume I still got a good amount of 50K ones. A lot of 49.7 I'm seeing. So
I actually set a rule in Fantasy Cruncher to not allow it to make lineups for me that use 100% of the salary. I made sure all of them leave at least 100 on the table.
That is an interesting wrinkle that I find it. I find that appealing. But the thing though is like that doesn't account for like what if it's one that's 50K, but you're getting whatever Neto in the mix or Neto and Sumner in the mix, and all of a sudden that's a unique lineup. Like that'd be the one concern I would have. But I think that's an interesting strategy.
Yeah, I mean, just because I think, particularly for this slate, I think there are different slates where you could view it differently, where maybe there isn't an uber amount of chalk, but I don't think there's any way there's a lineup that's going to have, say, like Westbrook and Sabonis in it that uses all the salary that isn't duped a gazillion times.
That is reasonable. I think to me, the one thing, and I guess this is something, if you are somebody out there who has a great amount of courage with your lineups, if you don't play one of Westbrook or one of Sabonis and X amount of lineups, or even if you just build, 25% of them to not have Sabonis, 25% to not have Westbrook at all, like you're going to be different from a lot of the field right away, because I agree like with what you're saying. And I think for me, part of the choice that I made was that I think Westbrook and Sabonis, I find it very hard to believe they're not in the winning lineup, whether it be as utility or captain. I couldn't get away from them entirely. And I think that was my choice to just try to increase the profitability overall. But boy, if you don't play one of them for a certain amount, like in that lineup goes off, like you are going to be in fantastic position.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I think if you are playing Westbrook and Sabonis, make sure you leave at least $100 in salary on the table.
So here's what I think your Sumner take too is getting better the more that I see the YouTube chat talking about it. People saying Sumner won't get playing time. Like he was getting playing time last game. He just was hurt again. And in fact, was like getting playing time. It was sort of being featured with how he was using the ball in that limited stretch. But I would say for Sumner, like I would still assume he gets minutes here. It's just more that he played himself off the court by being hurt. And usually guys don't lose their spot due to injury.
Yeah. And by the way, my level of confidence in him playing big minutes is low. But I'm comparing it to what are his odds of playing minutes greater than the 5% ownership we currently have projected for him? Because right now we have him at 5% projected ownership. Look at some of the other cheap Pacers guys. We have Aaron Holiday, who people seem to like in the chat. He's at 3,600. People are saying like, oh, Holiday, good play. I think there was a question we got in the premium Slack chat about Holiday also. If Sumner is healthy, he was routinely ahead of Aaron Holiday in the rotation this year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he came in earlier than him last game too. He came in the second that Justin Holiday went out, and then Aaron Holiday came in a few minutes later. And I think that's, the main thing is really for Sumner. Like he probably was on pace to play. He probably was on pace to play like 14 minutes flat, but he could have easily earned himself a few more minutes with good play. He's also closed before against Washington in the past, like when he was a starter, but still has closed against them. There's a lot of pathways for Sumner to pick up, from those 14 minutes to go to 20. But I think either way, like 14 minutes of Sumner at his price tag, like that could be enough to just open up the lineup construction you need.
Yeah, and it's also just it also just has to do with ownership, right? If you're playing guys like Sabonis, Westbrook, I think these guys are very likely to be optimal. And by the way, it could absolutely be right that Edmund Sumner isn't healthy enough to get minutes, or maybe he goes out and plays a few minutes, doesn't feel well, doesn't play well, and they just don't bring him back in. That's definitely within the range of outcomes, but he's 5% owned, honestly, where there's a massive amount of chalk and it's hard to differentiate.
And I think too, the more that I see the YouTube chat just talk about how he's not healthy, like he might not be healthy, but he was going to play minutes last game. That's the main thing. Like he's healthy enough to play today. And they're saying that he's active, knowing that what happened with him last game. Like if he weren't available to play and they weren't going to play him, I think they would have just made him inactive. Like I don't think there's any reason to play mind games at this point with Edmund Sumner's status.
Yeah, imagine if the Wizards are like, oh crap, Edmund Sumner's in. Like they got Scotty Brooks is running into the back with a whiteboard. He's erasing stuff. He's rearranging his game plans for the day. He's like, oh, like we have to do their tip off differently. I don't know what you do when bench players come in, but yeah, like I agree. I think if he wasn't going to play, then he would just be inactive.
It's a cruel Sumner. That's what I would say. We got 2 minutes left to lock. Less by the time you guys hear this to start getting your lineups in. Any final thoughts, Greg? You want to just tell people what you think the winning lineup will be? I feel like this is a fun one because they can't steal it at this point.
Let's see. I could say the one. Well, here's the lineup I have projected for the most fantasy points. I might as well just give this out. Okay. It is Domantas Sabonis at captain, and the utilities are Lopez, Len, Beal, Westbrook, and Justin Holiday. Also a lineup that I would not use because it also leaves all the salary on the table. But there you go. There's the one that I project for the most fantasy points, at least.
So yeah, I've ignored all the ones that I projected for the most fantasy points because of Westbrook and Sabonis being a captain in them. But I think Beal at captain with Sabonis and Westbrook still involved is the move. And then after that, boy, your guess is going to be as good as mine. But I think to me, the Beal captain one is the one, and a Rui captain too. I think those are long enough odds where I'd place that bet. If there were a sports book that were somehow taking bets on DFS tournament outcomes, Rui at captain is a bet that I would make, and I'm making with my lineups. In fact, Greg, give people your plugs here because we're close enough to lock anyway.
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at GErenbergDFS, and that's it. We have no more shows to do today. It's the end of the day for us anyway. We do have the MMA strategy show coming up after us, so definitely stick around, subscribe to the channel because we do have Jason Floyd and Pete Rogers talking some UFC.
Yeah, go hop over to that link now. Jason Floyd and Pete the Heat talking with our guy Tyler producing that one. So go check them out. Follow at Chris Spags, follow at Gerenberg DFS, and follow at Awesome_com. And tune in tomorrow. We got lots of content here on the channel. Starts bright and early as always. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the like button before you go too, and go jump over now to those MMA guys because they're going to help take care of you and give you a chance to win some more at UFC. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Good luck.
Vince Velasquez still 36% owned.
He looked like a good play. I got it.